All right. First of all, good morning. Or give me first slides on. So many, if not all of you in this room today will agree with me when I say that none of us likes food wasters, right? However, we can't deny the fact that we all waste food, be it to different extents, some of us more than others. My name is Maya Terro. I've been leading a minimalistic lifestyle since as long as I remember. Example, these shoes used to be my brother's, this pant used to be my sister's, and I had expired cereals for breakfast. So I'm pretty minimalistic. So naturally, I think I've been a food activist before I even knew that such a word existed, by the way. And in 2012, I translated my activism into a community-based, volunteer-driven NGO called Foodblessed that works on reducing hunger and food waste on a daily basis throughout Lebanon, one meal at a time. Foodblessed works with civil society and strategic partners to run soup kitchens. It also does collect food through food drives and from fundraiser events. And it also recovers surplus food and close to expiry and unsaleable products from going to waste. And the food collected is then distributed to people in need and underprivileged communities and local charities. So far, we've been able to distribute over 450,000 meals to people in need while rescuing around 100,000 tons of food from going to waste. Over the past 7 years, Foodblessed has taught me a lot about food waste. For instance, I didn't know that food waste and food loss are two different terms, although people use them interchangeably. So basically, if you look at the difference, food loss is anything that, for example, is lost while food is being transported, or the food that gets rotten or goes bad in the market or while being stored. And this usually happens unintentionally or by coincidence. But beyond the technicalities of food waste, Foodblessed has taught me a lot about the real value of food. It also taught me about the role that food plays in our day-to-day lives, and also of the power that food has over communities. As a result of that, I have become more mindful about the choices I make when it comes to consuming the food that goes into my body, and also about the impact that my daily dietary decisions and intake amounts affect those around me and the planet. In addition to that, I also learned that reducing food waste is something that is long-term and requires the efforts of us all. And that when it comes, to reducing food waste, some people think that they don't have that much role to play. But through Foodblessed, I learned that every person has a role to play, and when we combine all these efforts together, we can see the impact right away. Right. But in order to fight food waste, one has to start from the very end, your plate. So while I was preparing this presentation, I came up with a really cool thing. All right, here's it. If you want to think about food waste, you have to start with your plate and you have to contemplate. Yay. I thought it was pretty smart, so honestly, So, you see, we're used to seeing the stuff on our plates, but what about the stuff that goes missing in between, right? So that's why I thought we need to contemplate more about what is going on in this plate, where it came from and where it's going. And in this case, I thought that one should get a closer look at the way we produce and harvest and package and transport and purchase and consume and even discard the food that we have. Because food waste, believe it or not, happens all along the food supply chain. But food is not wasted the same way in every part of the world. In high and medium income countries, for example, 40% of the food waste occurs at the level of consumers and in the markets. Whereas in low income countries, food is rarely wasted by households. It usually happens or is lost, because now we know the difference between loss and waste, at the post-harvest and the processing stages. And that's usually because of lack of infrastructure when it comes to like refrigeration or pasteurization or even like storage. Understanding where along the food supply chain food waste happens will provide us with opportunities to create effective solutions to prevent these wastes and losses from happening. All right, this was not on? No, you just saw this, right? Damn, I'll give you a second to read it. It's basically a summary of what I just said. Okay. Well, you can contemplate. So yesterday was a typical day for me at Foodblessed. I started my morning visiting a local supermarket and seeing what they have stuff to throw so that I can rescue that. And then in the evening, I was invited to a reception by the British Embassy, and they had lots of food that I successfully was able to rescue from going to waste. And among the many things that I was able to rescue from the local supermarkets are these 9 bars of chocolate, like really fine chocolate. Like one cost $14. I would never buy this chocolate. So I thought about using these to explain something about the food system and how it functions today. So think of these 9 bars of chocolate as the food supply chain, right? Just gonna open them. And you're more than welcome to eat expired chocolate. It really tastes good. Ask me, because I know. All right, so wait. All right, because I don't want to miss this though. All right, so the first bar of chocolate, we're gonna just throw away, because this is what usually gets lost before we even leave the field, that this is like lost for things that we cannot control. Then after that, we take 3 bars of chocolate, and these bars are usually lost because of what we decide to feed to livestock. And livestock are really inefficient animals. What they do is like, they take 2 out of these 3 and they turn it into feces and heat. And then whatever we have rest is turned into dairy and meat. And then after that, we take 2 more that we throw directly into the bin. And this is what most people would think of when they think of food waste. It's the food that we throw in the bins in our households, in restaurants, and in supermarkets. And then after that, we see that we have only 4 left. And this is usually what's left of the 9 that we started with. So if you're anything like me, this is pretty mind-boggling, because the food system is pretty inefficient to start with. And this happens all the time. So especially when you think of the billion hungry people on one side and all the food that's being wasted, which is 30% of all the food we produce globally goes to waste or is lost before it reaches our plate. Contemplate. So this is the food supply chain. So these chocolates, we're representing the many steps that happen along the food supply chain. And most people think that food waste is just here, whereas it starts from the very beginning until it reaches our plate. And this is even a nicer image. So you have farming, post-harvesting, processing, distribution, retail, and consumer. Food loss is what happens from here up to here. And most of it is like accidental, whereas food waste is at the retail and consumer level, and most of it can be controlled by the decisions we make. So another thing that people don't often realize is that when we waste food, we're actually wasting money. And more than that, we're also wasting the natural resources, like the water, the energy, the time, the effort, the labor, everything that went into us getting these chocolate bars, for example. And this is something, and then there's, let me just use this one. Yeah, this one. So, and then there's the landfills. And, well, most people now are talking about climate change, but most of us don't realize is that when food decomposes in landfills, which is where it usually ends up, especially in a country like Lebanon, where landfills are the only and first option for food waste. So as food decomposes, they release methane gas. And methane gases are 25 more potent when it comes, like, it's a greenhouse gas that is 25 more potent than carbon dioxide and is the #1 contributor of climate change. So according to FAO, 30% of the food that we produce goes to waste, and 8% of that becomes greenhouse gas emissions. So simply put, usually if you want to explain it in lay terms, if food waste was a country, it would be third after the US and China in terms of the amounts of greenhouse gases emitted by it. And so guess what? Reducing food waste apparently can reverse the effects of climate change. Yay. All right, cool. Love the enthusiasm. So why is food waste bad, right? Because, yeah, so food waste is bad and shit happens, but this is major shit, bro. Like, it's not your ordinary shit. And I tried to, like, summarize 3 major points why food waste is bad. And it all has to do with value indirectly, right? When we talk about, like, economic, environmental, or even on the morality level, it's all about values, how you see it. So economically, as I said, when you waste food, you're like, think about it. When you're throwing food in the bin, you're just throwing like dollar bills or pounds. It's as easy as that. And then other than that, it's also environmentally bad because as we just talked about the greenhouse gases that are emitted by food waste, they're really bad for the environment and they cause climate change. And then the part that not a lot of people think about it is that the morality one, or the nutritional aspect. Like, you're throwing good food that you need to survive and to be, like, to function properly. So not a lot of people think that way. And the morality bit is more has to do with religion, but also for me on a spiritual level, because when I think of food, I don't think just about something I have to eat to live. It's more like what I choose to eat, it reflects the person I am. And as some of you or all of you know, that I'm not a vegetarian, right? But I'm a flexitarian, so I try to limit the amount of meat I consume. And I think that's a choice that a lot of us can make, and it has a huge impact on the environment. And other than that, this bit. So yeah, this is the food recovery hierarchy, and what I was saying is that landfill, when it comes to food waste, should be the last resort, but most of the time it's the first, and sometimes only, and that's bad. Because look at what you can do with food that is wasted, usually, before you can just throw it in a landfill. All right, so this is what I think food means to me, at least. I haven't seen it anywhere, by the way. I've done my research. So a lot of people will say food waste is bad because it's economically not good for the countries, nutritional value, environment, religion says you can't waste, it's a sin. And then this, food is love, and I've learned that from Foodblessed, and I've learned it from my mother, and I think we all know it, but we don't talk about it as much. And when we share food with someone, we're usually like sharing our love, and that's what mothers do and like our partners do when they cook for us, for example, or when we donate something that we don't, or not really donate, but when we share what we have with someone in need, or anyone, a stranger, it just makes them feel loved and appreciated. And beyond the love bit, I think food also provides equality, because when we have soup kitchens, a lot of people from so many different backgrounds, be it the people we're serving or the volunteers, they all gather in one space and everyone feels equal. So food is usually like a tool of equality, where if you're sharing, like I think of it that way, so a table is flat, right? And everyone's seated around the table. So unless you're a giant, sorry, you will all feel equal on a table, right? And also if you think about it in social context, sometimes in certain families or communities, like the father usually sits on the edge of the table because he has like more power. So there's a lot of power dynamics happening around the table, and even in the quantities of food, who gets more food than others. And I still have 5 minutes. Other than that, food also has the power to sustain life, which we all know. We need to eat to live, yani. It's a natural thing. And food has the power to heal and spread love, because it empowers communities to build bonds and social cohesion, and allows people to share the love with others, and it enables them to feel loved. All right. Last slide. Solution, so what now? I remain hopeful. I do believe that we as people do have the power to reduce food waste. I'm not saying we're gonna stop food waste. There's always gonna be food waste. The solution or the way going forward is how to reduce the amount of food that is wasted on a daily basis. Saha. We need to start with ourselves first, so we really need to take a really good look at our plates, what we're eating, how much food is left in our plate, and what are we usually doing with what's left in our plate. And then we need to make some noise about all the food loss and food waste that we're producing to the corporations, to the governments, and like pressure them to take action towards putting an end to food waste. We do have the power to bring about the change that we need to see. And prevention is the most substantive solution to reducing food waste. But when we can't prevent, there's something that you can usually do. It's called the 3 R's of food waste. And they reduce, recover, recycle. So because I've talked enough about food waste today and about Foodblessed, I wanted to leave you with some actions that you can take. So knowing is something and then doing is another. And sometimes doing is more important than just knowing things. So my advice for you is, and I do these all the time, so when you're shopping, never go on an empty stomach, or when you're hungry, you're gonna buy more than you need, believe me. Don't buy in bulks, like buy 2, get 1 free. You don't need that free shit, believe me. And it's usually not nutritious stuff. It's like chips and crackers and stuff that you really don't need in your system. Another one you can do is always be prepared to get a grocery list with you, because then you'll buy only the things that you need, which is very important in being minimalist or reducing your waste or anything in life. Always try to purchase what you need only. Everything else is just like a waste in preparation to become waste. Recover is usually, I would say, definitely use your leftovers, and don't be afraid of expiry dates and best before. I've been eating expired food for 7 years, and I'm still here. And my parents still don't believe that it's possible. So every time my dad cleans the fridge, I end up with nothing. It's all in the trash, and I cry. I don't cry, but I want to cry. And then you can recycle, which is composting. It's very important, because what can't feed you can feed like plants, and we need plants, right? Because it's a cycle, and then eventually they'll end up feeding us. So being nice to them will eventually give us some benefits. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for your time.